the inflation has been going together with nice improvements in profitability across many, many sectors. But I'm struck by the fact that no one is talking about what used to be a big topic, namely something we call stagflation. And let me remind everyone what that is. That's when the Federal Reserve raises interest rates, ostensibly to slow or stop an inflation, but fails to do so. So that we end up with rising interest rates, cutting down people's ability to spend because they can't afford to borrow at those rates, but that the prices don't come down. So we have a mixture of inflation and stagnation in the sense of productivity and employment. And we even have a term because that has happened so often, stagflation, a new word in our lexicon. Well, you would think for people who have had some experience, which the Fed people by virtue of their age alone have had, that they would talk about that and give us some reason, any reason, to believe that we aren't at risk of having stagflation, namely higher interest rates with no amelioration of the inflation problem. There are plenty of specialists looking at this who believe precisely that's where we're headed. So it's not as though I'm the only one who remembers this term that we all learned in economics graduate school. But here's an even bigger issue. Raising interest rates never was and is not now the only way that the Federal Reserve or the U.S. government has reacted to inflationary situations. In 1971, a conservative President Nixon imposed a wage price freeze to stop an inflation. It worked beautifully, so well that its initial duration, 3 months, was extended because it had done the job without raising interest rates by this alternative. I am not saying that the alternative has no problems. It's not a panacea. But to exclude it from conversation, to exclude it from the agenda so that the Federal Reserve not only doesn't consider it, but doesn't even deign to give us a reason why is remarkable, and it should be alarming. Here's a second example, same point. In the early 1940s, then President, progressive Democrat, at least retrospectively, Franklin Roosevelt, is confronted by his economic advisors, who included one of my professors, John Kenneth Galbraith. He's confronted by them and told, look, you're moving resources to fight a war. Those resources used to be used to make consumer goods and all kinds of appliances, and we're not using them for that anymore. And therefore, we're going to have very quickly, here we go, a sudden shortage of consumer goods. The demand for them isn't going away. The American people want to have a cup of coffee. They want to put sugar in it. They want to have meat with their meals, et cetera, and they're not going to have the supply. If we allow the market to deal with this situation, the shortage will give us an inflation. People with money will bid up the price of scarce consumer goods so that the middle income and lower income people will be frozen out of the market. And that, at a time when you're trying to fight a world war, you think puts you in danger, would be crazy. You'd be dividing your people with bitterness and envy when you need the exact opposite, solidarity and unity. And what did Roosevelt do? He took Galbraith and the others' advice seriously. And he said, okay, for the following important scarce consumer items, meat, sugar, flour, gasoline for your car, coffee, and a whole bunch of others, you won't use money anymore. It will not be sold to the highest bidder. The only way a storekeeper can legitimately sell any of those items is if you have a ration card. The government printed ration books. There were little stamps you tore out of the book, and to get a quart of milk, you had to give the storekeeper that stamp. If you only gave them money and they gave you the milk, they would be liable to arrest. That was illegal. They had to use the stamps. And the government, some of you may smile, distributed these books, these ration cards, ration stamps, according to the notion of what did you need. If you had a lot of young children, you got stamps for milk. If you were an elderly couple, you didn't get stamps for milk. If you were rural, you got more stamps for gasoline, to move your truck. If you were urban and had mass transit, you wouldn't get them, etc. Logical things. Rationing is an alternative. Wage price freezes are an alternative. That we as a nation have a Federal Reserve charged with dealing with price instability. That's their fault, since they're the ones supposed to keep it stable. That they would have a conversation whose real purpose is to make all of us not question which tool is being used according to who gets hurt and who gets benefited by it, but rather we're only left to debate, should it be 0.75%, 0.5%? My goodness, this is an exercise in censorship of the most damaging kind, because it immediately translates into damage to the standard of living of the American people. The automobile companies, during the pandemic and now this last 18 months, have been making record profits on a scale they've never seen before, at the same time that they are producing and selling many fewer cars at a much higher price. So the inflation, jacking up the price, selling fewer cars, has been very profitable for them. Why in the world should they be in any hurry to get rid of this inflation? Oh, they can talk about it. It's a terrible thing. We should do something. And then they go off and play golf and have 4 martinis, because there's no pressure on them. In fact, this inflation has been working real well for them. So my suspicion is that's why the inflation is lasting as long as it does. And finally, as you yourself suggested, Chris, at the beginning, when you raise the price of goods and services, like you raise the interest rate on borrowing money, that's a problem for middle and lower income people. It's a problem for medium and small businesses. But for the big businesses that we know have a dominant voice in our government, not only federally, but at the state levels, this is not a major problem. They're the ones who can best afford the prices and the interest rates. It's all the rest of us, the majority, who are put in a difficulty. Another way of saying it is the official rate of inflation right now is 7.7% last time I looked, and the official rate of increase of wages is in the neighborhood of 4.5% to 5%. Well, bingo, you don't need all that much more. Prices are going up markedly higher and faster than wages, and that's a good thing for profits, because it always was.